Welcome back to CVM News at noon. It's time for our discussion segment, and we're talking the recent breach of Jamaica's airspace with opposition spokesperson on foreign affairs, Dr. Angela Brown Burke. Dr. Brown Burke, welcome.
Thank you for inviting me, and good afternoon to your listeners and viewers.
Thank you. So, Dr. Brown Burke, your initial reaction to news that we've had some Indians and Uzbekistanis, I don't even know what the proper term for them are, but people who were undocumented entering our country via the airspace just last week.
Well, I was shocked to hear it on a from a number of perspectives. One, for me, it is around the standards that we apply to all individuals coming in. I remember during COVID that Jamaicans were actually kept on the high seas. They couldn't come in, because there were protocols that had to be cleared. The Haitians came and they were sent back to war-torn Haiti again, protocols that needed to be upheld. So the questions here would be, who authorized the clearance of these individuals? How did they get here? Who are they? What organization chartered the flight? There must have been someone with all of these protocols being breached. There must have been someone who made a call to say, let's give them a blight. Who was that person? And who was also the individual or individuals who authorized allowing them to come into the Jamaican space? There are also issues not just around immigration, but now also around national security.
Yes.
Because our airspace should be one of our more protected borders. And if it is that 218 individuals can leave India, stop gather in Dubai or wherever, then land up in Jamaica with no clear papers, nothing in terms of being authorized to enter, and we just open the country and give it to them like that, they end up at a hotel which they had booked but had not paid for. Where are they now? How are we going to ensure that they are going to be leaving the country? And what are the implications for the future?
Well, that is a question I'd like to pose to you. As opposition spokesperson on foreign affairs, what are the potential security implications of such an unauthorized entry?
I think it was quite some time ago, persons had been raising the issue about Jamaica being so close to the U.S. and that we could become one of those ports that people could come into to launch an attack and all of that. And we kept saying, that Jamaica, the airspace has never been used like that. Jamaica as a country has never been used like that. With something like this happening, it throws the door wide open. So we are all at risk. We are all at risk. And given all the issues we have already with smuggling, once upon a time we would have heard of these planes coming in, bringing in contraband. It would be done in the dead of night. And if police was there, they would try to flee the police. But what we have is a total reverse of that situation, that they come in and that they are afforded an entry. And so from a national security point of view, from an immigration point of view, from a breakdown of all the safeguards that we would have had. So we have to have a look at that. How did all of these safeguards fall?
And we're going to touch on that right after this break. Do stay with us. Welcome back to our discussion segment here on CVM News at noon. I have on Zoom the opposition spokesperson on foreign affairs, and we're discussing Jamaica's airspace and also recent events that led us to believe over 218 undocumented travelers are currently or potentially still in Jamaica. We don't know where they are. Do you, Madam Spokesperson, do you currently have any idea how many of them, or how many of them, well, How many of them are still in Jamaica? I was going to say how many
No,
left,
I don't.
but
I
we
don't,
don't
and I'm
know.
not even sure that the authorities do, which is part of why this is so frightening. You know, this kind of violation of our airspace is not something that we should take lightly. 218 individuals in Jamaica, well, basically unauthorized in the sense that they have broken every protocol and all of the standards that should have been in place. And we don't know where they are. We don't know where they're going from here, you know. So what we have to find out is what is being put in place from a national security standpoint to ensure, and immigration standpoint, to ensure that these individuals are returned to that plane and that they leave Jamaican airspace. What questions have been asked of the crew? You know, this is a chartered flight. Who chartered it? What instructions were given to the flight crew? Why did they come to Jamaica in particular? What were they expecting? I saw something that said that they were not expecting to remain in the country. You know, so that too raises some questions around that. You know, to find out what they had expected. Were they supposed to just leave them and they would find their way home? You know, and it's frightening because regular Jamaicans returning to Jamaica do not get such an easy pass. So how is this happening?
Well, what actions do you believe should be taken security-wise once we hear from the minister or the ministry in relation to these people?
Well, first of all, we need the Minister of National Security has to take responsibility for making sure that they identify these individuals and get them in a secure environment to ensure, first of all, that they are not a threat to Jamaicans, and secondly, to ensure that they are returned. You know, immigration has a role to play there as well in terms of doing the necessary investigations so that the individuals can be apprehended. The government also has to go beyond that as well. They have to find out institutionally where these breakdowns occur. You know, all the protocols that were breached, how were they breached? What caused them to be breached? Who are the individuals that allowed this to happen? What is the rationale for that? And I believe that something like this cannot end without some kind of sanctions for the individuals who did not behave appropriately, who would have allowed this kind of breach to take place.
I mean, these are major protocol gaps and deficiencies, but ideally, what would you anticipate happens outside of what you just mentioned about sanctions, etc.? Where do we go from here in relation to matters of this nature?
Well, you know, in 2003, I think France had a similar case. I think it was, in fact, an Indian airline as well, with 300 individuals who landed without the requisite documentation. And the individuals stayed on the tarmac for 4 days until that could be sorted out. And we need to have a system that is able to do that. It can't be that because you don't have space to hold them, it then means that you allow them to make their own accommodations with a hotel, which turns out not to even be what you thought it was, because they booked but didn't pay, and so no one knows how many of them actually entered there. So I think that the safeguards for those things is really what we need to make sure don't fail again. So a proper investigation needs to be done to identify where the gaps were.
Indeed. Finally, what recommendations would you make to the government in strengthening its overall national security and response capabilities in terms of airports?
Well, first of all, you know, we would have thought that the airport is one of the more secure borders, and so we have to look again at all of our points of entry to make sure that the protocols that have been established are well known and that they are adhered to, and that people understand that if these protocols are breached, that there are serious consequences. Once they're established, people know them. If they're breached, there need to be sanctions. And I think it is going to be the certainty of sanctions that is probably going to ensure that people are on the top of their game in terms of making sure that these protocols are not breached.
All right, thank you so much. That's Opposition Spokesperson on Foreign Affairs, Dr. Angela Brown Burke.